Evan Calder had learned to measure time in quiet mornings, quiet streets, quiet habits that replaced the noise of a life he had left behind years earlier. He lived outside a coastal town called Greyhaven, where the road narrowed and the wind carried salt instead of sirens. At 47, he kept his world intentionally small, woodworking in the mornings, running at dusk, and long stretches of silence that felt earned. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. It helps more than you know. His daughter Lila called him every Sunday. She always had. Even after she married Jonah 2 months earlier, even after she told him, voice shaking with excitement, that she was pregnant. Evan had stood in his workshop holding the phone, staring at a knot in a plank while the weight of that news settled into something warm and unfamiliar. Grandfatherhood had arrived faster than he expected. The family reunion was not Evan's idea. It never was. It belonged to Jonah's side of the family, moneyed, expansive, loud in a way Evan found exhausting. Lila insisted it would be fine. She said it would be brief. She said she wanted peace. Evan agreed to go because he trusted his daughter. The estate sat behind iron gates on a bluff overlooking the water, the kind of place that announced ownership before a word was spoken. Jonah's grandfather, Marcus Halevic, had built an empire out of logistics contracts and political favors. At 67, he moved like a man used to obedience. His smile never reached his eyes. Evan noticed how Lila's shoulders tightened the moment they arrived. She stayed close to Evan at first. She was 19, still carrying that softness of youth despite the ring on her finger. Pregnancy had made her tired. Evan could see it in the careful way she moved, the way she rested a hand against her stomach when she thought no one was watching. Marcus Halevic noticed too. The comment came quietly at first. A remark about portion sizes. A joke framed as concern. Laughter followed from people who knew better than to disagree. Evan felt the shift before the words fully landed. He recognized the posture, the circle tightening. He stepped closer to Lila. "It's all right," she whispered, forcing a smile that didn't belong on her face. Marcus waved a dismissive hand. "Family should be honest," he said. "If no one says it, how will she learn?" Evan's jaw set, but he said nothing. Not yet. The moment happened fast. A spilled drink, a sharp word. Lila turning away, embarrassed, trying to remove herself from the attention. Marcus followed. Voices rose. Evan moved, but the space between them closed too quickly. Marcus kicked her. Not a stumble, not an accident. A deliberate, angry motion meant to correct and dominate. Lila went down hard, her breath knocked from her chest as people gasped and then froze. Evan reached her first. She was shaking. Her face had gone pale, eyes wide with shock and pain. He dropped to his knees, one hand steadying her shoulder, the other hovering, afraid to hurt her further. "I'm here," he said, calm by instinct. "Stay with me." Someone called for help. Someone else argued. Marcus stood back, already rewriting the moment in his head, already certain money would smooth what violence had started. The ambulance arrived too late to change what had already happened. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. A doctor spoke in measured tones about internal injuries, about stress, about loss. Lila cried without sound when they told her the pregnancy was gone. Jonah held her hand and stared at the wall like it might explain how the world had broken so quickly. Evan stood at the foot of the bed, silent. He listened. He absorbed. He let the facts settle. Police came. Statements were taken. Marcus's lawyers arrived before the paperwork cooled. But this time something was different. Witnesses had seen too much. Medical reports were too clear. The assault was documented. The money slowed nothing. Justice, for once, moved the way it was supposed to. Evan sat with his daughter until visiting hours ended. He didn't promise revenge. He didn't speak about anger. He just told her she was not alone, and that he would handle what came next. Outside, the night air felt heavier than it had that morning. Evan walked to his truck and sat behind the wheel without starting it. The quiet he had built his life around felt thin now, stretched tight by a truth he could no longer ignore. Some families believed their power made them untouchable. Evan knew better, and as the hospital lights faded behind him, he understood that restraint was not the absence of action. It was choosing when and how the action came. The road ahead was clear. The investigation moved faster than Marcus Halevic expected. That alone unsettled him. Greyhaven's police chief was not impressed by wealth that arrived late and spoke loudly. Medical records were unambiguous. Witness statements aligned. Security footage from a neighboring property caught the aftermath. Enough to confirm timing, not enough to excuse intent. The case didn't collapse into ambiguity the way Marcus's problems usually did. Evan Calder watched the process with the patience of a man who understood systems. He did not interfere. He did not posture. He answered questions when asked and otherwise stayed quiet. His experience had taught him that truth, when allowed to move cleanly, carried its own momentum. Lila remained in the hospital for observation. The physical injuries stabilized first. The emotional ones took longer. Evan sat with her through the silences. He listened when she needed to speak and stayed still when words failed her. Jonah was there every day. He was young, 22, and still learning how to be strong without being loud. He blamed himself. Evan corrected that gently, again and again. "This wasn't your fault," Evan said one afternoon as Jonah paced the hallway. "And it's not your responsibility to make this right." Jonah nodded, but the lesson took time. Marcus, meanwhile, began applying pressure. Calls came from intermediaries, suggestions dressed up as concern, offers framed as reconciliation. Evan declined them all with the same calm response. "Please direct all communication to counsel." That phrase landed harder than any raised voice. Within weeks, charges were filed. Assault resulting in serious bodily injury. Aggravating circumstances. Marcus's name appeared on official documents the way it never had before, without flattery, without protection. The civil case followed. Lila testified by video. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. She spoke plainly about the kick, the pain, the loss. She did not embellish. She did not ask for sympathy. She told the truth and let it stand. The courtroom felt different after that. Marcus's influence still existed, but it had narrowed. Money could delay, but it could not erase what had already been recorded. Evan focused on one thing at a time. He helped Lila move into a quieter apartment near the water. He repaired a broken door hinge, replaced a flickering light, fixed small things that made the world feel manageable again. He didn't talk about vengeance. He talked about sleep schedules and routines. At night, when the house was quiet, Evan reviewed documents alone. He read filings. He tracked motions. He noted timelines. Not because he needed to intervene, but because understanding the field mattered. Control did not come from force. It came from awareness. Marcus's lawyers pushed for leniency. Medical experts pushed back. The judge ordered restrictions, no contact, no travel, monitored movements. The man who once decided outcomes with a nod now waited for permission to leave town. The shift was subtle, but Evan saw it. The system, when unimpeded, worked. Lila began therapy. Some days were better than others. Evan learned to recognize the signs when she needed company, when she needed space. He trained himself to be present without hovering. "You don't have to fix me," she said once. "I know," Evan replied. "I'm here to stand with you." As the case advanced, Marcus's composure cracked. He accused. He deflected. He claimed misunderstanding. None of it changed the evidence. None of it altered the outcome that was taking shape. Evan did not celebrate. He prepared. Because justice, even when it arrived, did not always settle the balance inside a man. And Evan knew himself well enough to understand that there was a difference between legal resolution and personal closure. One evening, he received a call from a former teammate. Not a request, not a warning, just an observation. "Your problem's shrinking," the voice said, "but it's not gone." Evan looked out at the water, dark and calm. "I'm aware. Be careful," the voice added. Evan ended the call without reply. He returned to the living room where Lila sat with Jonah, hands clasped together, breathing steady. They were rebuilding, slowly, honestly. Evan watched them for a moment longer than necessary. Some debts were paid in courtrooms. Others waited for the right moment to be acknowledged. And as the legal machinery continued its deliberate turn, Evan understood that restraint was still required, until it wasn't. The balance had not yet settled. By the time the trial dates were set, Marcus Halovic had begun to look smaller. Not physically, not yet, but the certainty that once surrounded him had thinned. He moved with caution now, checking doors twice, watching faces longer than necessary. The world no longer bent when he applied pressure. Evan Calder noticed. He stayed out of sight and out of comment. He attended hearings only when required. He let attorneys speak. He let judges decide. The law, when given room, was doing what it had been designed to do. The guilty plea came quietly. No cameras, no statements. Just a signature and a judge's nod. Assault charges reduced by age and medical arguments, but the conviction stood. Restrictions remained in place. Financial penalties followed. Civil liability attached itself like a shadow that would not lift. Marcus did not go to prison. He lost something else instead: control. Lila attended the final hearing in person. She sat straight, hands folded, eyes forward. Evan watched from the back of the room as she listened to the sentence without flinching. When it was over, she exhaled slowly, like she had been holding her breath for months. "It's done," Jonah whispered. Lila nodded. "It's done." Evan believed her, mostly. In the weeks that followed, life resumed its shape. Therapy continued. Work resumed. Even laughter returned in small, careful doses. Evan repaired a fence that had been leaning for years. Jonah took on extra shifts. Lila planted herbs on the apartment balcony and watched them grow. Healing was not dramatic. It was repetitive. Marcus, meanwhile, unraveled. He blamed his lawyers, he blamed the judge, he blamed everyone except himself. The restrictions frustrated him most. No travel, monitored accounts, limited movement. He had built his life on access. Now access required permission. That was when he reached out. The message came through a third party. A request framed as reconciliation. A chance to clear the air. A meeting proposed at one of Marcus's warehouses on the edge of the industrial district. "Empty now," he said, "unused, private." Evan read the message once. He waited 3 days before responding. "Fine," he wrote. "One conversation." He told no one. Not because he planned something reckless. Because he planned something controlled. The warehouse smelled of dust and old metal. Light filtered through high windows, cutting the space into pale rectangles. Marcus stood near a folding table, hands clasped, posture defensive but defiant. "You think you've won?" Marcus said as Evan approached. Evan didn't answer. Marcus stepped closer. "You humiliated me." "No," Evan replied calmly. "You did that yourself," Marcus sneered. "You think the law protects you now?" Evan studied him. The age showed when stripped of authority. The arrogance remained. "This isn't about protection," Evan said. "It's about balance." What followed was brief, precise. Evan moved the way he always had. Close, controlled, deliberate. No wild strikes, no visible damage. Pressure points. Breath stolen, then returned. Pain delivered in a way that left nothing to photograph and everything to remember. Marcus collapsed to his knees, gasping, eyes wide with disbelief. Evan knelt beside him. "You will feel this for weeks," he said quietly. "You won't be able to explain it, and you will never touch my family again." He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked out. Marcus reported nothing. There was nothing to report. No bruises, no fractures, no evidence that would survive scrutiny. Only pain and the understanding that some lines once crossed stayed crossed. Evan drove home as the sun dipped low, the sky turning the color of cooling ember. At Lila's apartment, Jonah answered the door. Evan said nothing about where he had been. He didn't need to. Lila looked up from the couch and smiled faintly. "You okay?" Evan nodded. "I am." And for the first time since the night of the hospital, it was true. Some reckonings ended in courtrooms. Others ended in silence, in empty buildings with lessons delivered the hard way. The balance had finally settled. What remained was life. The weeks after the warehouse passed without incident. That, more than anything, confirmed the outcome. Marcus Halevic did not call. He did not send intermediaries. He did not test boundaries. He stayed inside the limits imposed by the court and, more importantly, by fear he could not name or prove. His complaints remained private, shared only with lawyers who found nothing actionable to pursue. Pain without evidence had a way of teaching restraint. Evan Calder returned fully to the life he had paused. He repaired what needed repairing. He ran his usual routes. He showed up when Lila needed him and stepped back when she didn't. He never spoke about the warehouse, not because it was a secret, but because it was finished. Lila's recovery continued in layers. Some days were light, others heavy. She grieved the loss quietly now, no longer overwhelmed but still carrying it. Evan learned that healing did not move in straight lines. It doubled back. It hesitated. It demanded patience. Jonah stayed steady. He attended every appointment. He listened more than he spoke. When Lila struggled with sleep, he learned how to sit with her in silence without trying to fix what could not be fixed. Evan respected him for that. The legal consequences finalized by the end of the season. Marcus's civil penalties expanded as additional filings surfaced. Old grievances emboldened by the collapse of his influence. Contracts dissolved. Partnerships cooled. Invitations stopped arriving. Power, once cracked, did not reseal. Evan read the final notices once and filed them away. He did not savor them. Justice, when done properly, did not require an audience. At a small gathering near the water, Lila and Jonah announced they would move farther south for a fresh start. Nothing dramatic, just distance. Evan helped them pack boxes and load the truck, fixing a loose taillight before they left. Lila hugged him longer than usual. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Evan shook his head. "You don't." As their car disappeared down the road, Evan stood still until the sound faded completely. The quiet returned, heavier now, but not hollow. That night, Evan sat alone on his porch, watching the tide roll in and out beneath a cloudless sky. He thought about lines, legal ones, moral ones, and the kind that defined a man's responsibility when those he loved were harmed. He had not crossed his. He had honored them. The system had worked, and when it ended, so had he. Still, Evan knew one truth from experience. Peace was not something you reached. It was something you maintained. The past had loosened its grip, but it had not vanished. And as the coastal wind moved through the trees, Evan understood that the final chapter would not be about confrontation or consequence, but about choosing what kind of life remained after both. Some endings arrived quietly. Others waited to be claimed. Time did what it always did when left alone. It softened edges without erasing meaning. Months passed, then more. Greyhaven returned to its steady rhythm, the tide, the wind, the long quiet mornings Evan Calder preferred. He kept the same routines because routines were anchors. They reminded him that order did not require force, only intention. Marcus Halevic stayed invisible, not by court order anymore, by choice. He attended no gatherings, issued no statements. His name drifted out of conversations that once revolved around him. Influence, Evan had learned, depended on belief. Once belief cracked, the rest followed. Evan did not track him. He didn't need to. Lila called every week, sometimes more. Her voice sounded stronger now, still careful, still honest, but no longer fragile. She and Jonah settled into their new place near the marshlands south of town. Jonah found work. Lila returned to school slowly, choosing classes that fit the pace she needed. Grief did not disappear. It integrated. Evan noticed the change the first time Lila laughed without immediately checking herself. The second time was when she talked about the future without pausing. The third was when she told him she was ready to try again. Someday. Not now, but someday. That was enough. One evening, Evan drove to the edge of the old industrial district, not to revisit the past, but to close a mental door he had left ajar. The warehouses stood quiet, most repurposed, some abandoned. The place held no power over him anymore. He turned around before reaching the gate. There was nothing there he needed. Back home, he fixed the porch railing that had loosened over winter. He replaced a cracked board on the steps. He worked with his hands because hands understood closure better than thoughts did. A letter arrived from the court clerk weeks later. Case closed. Filings complete. No further action. Evan placed it in the drawer with the others and shut it. That night he slept without dreams. When summer arrived, Lila and Jonah visited. They stayed for a weekend, cooked dinner, walked the beach at dusk. The air was lighter than it had been in years. They talked about ordinary things. Neighbors, weather, plans that did not require defense. At one point, Lila stopped and looked at the horizon. "I don't feel like I'm running anymore," she said. Evan nodded. "Good." Jonah stood beside her, steady and quiet. The man had grown into his role without needing to announce it. Evan approved of that kind of strength. Before they left, Lila hugged him again. "You did this the right way," she said. Evan met her eyes. There was only one way. When their car disappeared down the road, Evan remained where he was for a moment longer, then turned back toward the house. The quiet returned, but it was a gentler kind this time. Not empty, Settled. Justice had been served where it belonged. Closure had followed without spectacle. And the man Evan had been, the one shaped by discipline, restraint, and hard-earned boundaries, stood intact at the end of it all. He did not celebrate. He continued. Because the measure of a life was not the battles it survived, but the calm it protected afterward. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.